We are back again with our interview series of Empathy in Action, doing interviews with role models and leaders, community leaders who are making a difference in our community. And definitely today, I am thrilled to have Nancy Light here. She is the Executive Director of Francis House. And anyone in Syracuse who lives here, I'm sure has heard of Francis House. But we're going to get a little bit of a different perspective today based on our pandemic. So good morning, Nancy.
Thank you. Good morning, Kristen. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to do this. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so glad you've been able to make the time to come in and join us today.
Glad to do it.
What we'd like to do is to give a little bit of perspective. If you could go back pre-pandemic and give us an idea of what you were doing, what Francis House was doing, what services were being provided. And so we know what a typical normal day might have looked like. And then we'll jump forward into what's happening now.
Okay. I can do that. So before the pandemic and all of the quarantine and all the changes that have been required, we were functioning as what our mission says. We're a home for people who are terminally ill, where they can die with dignity and experience the unconditional love of God. The second part of our mission is to use our lived experience as a resource for others, to help others give end-of-life care and support based on a lot of the history that we have been through and the information we have that can help people look at the way they approach end-of-life in their setting. So our basic mission is to provide that end-of-life care for someone who's terminally ill. And that starts with taking a referral, going out and visiting the person in their home, talking to their family, getting a sense of how they are physically, how they are from a support system standpoint, and then beginning to decide of all the referrals we receive, and it was over 600 a year last year.
Wow.
How many of those people really needed to come to Francis House when we had the bed available? That's the hard part. With 16 bedrooms, you have to spend a fair amount of time figuring out really who's most in need. They don't have family, their symptom management is not able to be handled at home. They've been hospitalized and now cannot go back home. So we put a lot of time and effort into collecting that information, talking with the hospital folks, talking with, as I said, families and residents who are at home. Then we make an admission decision and offer the bed, and the person says yes, they come in, we greet their family. We are obviously a very Franciscan-based organization, and so it's a lot of love all around with hugs and, hand-holding and support. The day that someone comes into Francis House is a very traumatic day. Even though they've thought about it, it's very, very hard to step into a door that you feel is going to be the last place you will live, and very hard for family to accept that. So we did everything we could to put people at ease, to make them welcome, to just say, we are here, you are here, together we are going to make this work in the best way for your loved one, in the best way for you. So we're here together to make all of that happen. Then we have volunteers. Our volunteers are wonderful. They started at 8 in the morning and they work through until different shifts, until 10 o'clock at night, doing all of the support tasks that you need to have done, the cooking and some of the cleaning and baking, all of the things you would do in a home. But the most important thing that they did was to be able to lend support to the residents and their families. Every 4 hours, we'd have a new volunteer shift. They would come in enthusiastic, ready to go, ready for their day, ready for their evening, bringing smiles and a different perspective to the house, which was so important to our staff, certainly, and very important to our residents and family members. So we had this core family of caregivers, administrators, people who actually are working here at Francis House, but then this huge extended Francis House family to bring all of that love and compassion to the resident at their bedside and to the family member who was grieving in anticipation of the loss of their loved one. So together, it was just a wonderful symbiotic relationship. Everything just worked together. Everyone fed off of everyone else's energy. Just a really terrific feeling when you walk in the door. It's just, you smelled cookies, you felt love. It's just a wonderful feeling. And it was the people who made this happen. You know, it was the care staff who are here and our volunteers who made that happen. So that's a typical day of someone coming in. The volunteers would prepare our lunch and serve it to residents. They would be there through the evening to make a light evening meal or to just sit, hold a hand of a resident who was alone, just that physical presence of another person. So a resident did not feel alone, even if family was in town but not physically there. There was always someone to provide that presence, and we call that compassionate presence. That's what we do, just sit and listen. We don't have to talk, we don't have to do anything but be present to the resident, and our volunteers were wonderful at doing that, and our staff. So that was kind of a typical day. You know, you had all the things going on in a household where someone is being cared for that you think would happen, and it did. We had gatherings, we had social gatherings, we had, you know, celebrations inside and outside the house. Our board members met here every other month. We had our meetings here. It was a very vibrant house. So now you come to post then and to now with the pandemic. So we were really required, because at the outset nobody knew how contagious this thing was. We knew it was terrible. We knew we had to be so careful. We could not put people at risk. So the first thing we had to do was stop admitting new people, because we couldn't bring people in not knowing what home situation was. Had they been exposed to coronavirus? Had they been ill with respiratory illness? And without being able to define what those respiratory symptoms were, it was imperative that we not bring knowingly someone with a respiratory illness into Francis House, because then your staff is at risk, the other residents are at risk. It's that whole, you know, public health piece that we had to be considerate of. Then that was the first thing. The second thing was that we could not have volunteers, because so many of our volunteers are over 65, and that of course was the group that are most at risk based on all of the CDC recommendations back then. And it was not fair of us to put them at risk in our setting. We were doing everything we could do to maintain CDC guidelines, but you know, people were told to stay home. If you don't need to be out, stay home. So we were saying, it's okay, don't feel as though you must come here. You should do what the governor and the country is saying, and that is stay home until we can get some sort of a handle on this pandemic. With that then, to move forward, we really had to think about how can we care for people without our volunteer support, because then it falls to the staff. And how are we going to do that? How are we going to provide safe care around the clock for our residents and be able to do that in a way that still meets our mission of providing a home and a family for someone who's at end of life? So we put together several internal plans for direct care staff and for administrative staff. Direct care staff primarily carrying out all of the care functions, as well as being responsible for upholding all of the infection control standards that we had to have in place. So I said earlier that when you walked in the house, 6 months ago, you could smell cookies. Well, now
Yeah.
you're kind of smelling Clorox. I mean,
Yeah.
that was sort of the way that it went. But it had to be done. And the care staff, Sister Geraldine DeLuca is on our staff. And she, with her nursing background and her education background, was an excellent educator. And she was able to really bring the staff way above par as far as infection control. We have always had good infection control, but she really raised the bar, did a great deal of education, a great deal of demonstration and return demonstration. So our staff has been really, really educated and have been diligent since the pandemic in making sure all of the infection control standards are followed. So direct care and all of that essential cleaning fell to the care staff. The meal preparation and so forth fell to administrative staff. So we took turns, we took shifts, we had meals that we prepared that we brought in, or we created a meal as we normally would. And then we determined that because of trying to maintain distancing, that only one person in the kitchen would be appropriate. So you couldn't have someone making breakfast and someone else right next to them preparing the meal for lunch. It was too close quarters. So we decided to do all homemade food, but prepared ahead of time that could either be brought in or could be frozen and used on a weekend. So it was all fresh, all homemade meals that we had always done, but prepared in a way that all we had to do was reheat and serve. So our menu coordinator worked with some of our volunteers who really wanted to help and created a meal plan for a month in advance, knowing exactly what was available, what was being brought in, who was bringing it. We didn't want to have spaghetti every day, so she made a really good plan to have different meals for the residents. And we've been doing that since this whole thing started. And I will have to say that our volunteers who have not been able to be here have just been extraordinary in terms of baking things, making casseroles, bringing in food. They'll call up and say, I'm here and I have 6 dozen chocolate chip cookies, and they leave them at the door, and then we go on. But they have just been extraordinary. So meal service has continued on the way that it was, but it's not the same because you don't have that volunteer presence to carry the meal into the room for the resident. So you don't have that other face to talk to. You don't have that other person who can comment on your pictures and say, oh my gosh, I haven't seen that before. Is that your dog? Is that your granddaughter? And begin that conversation. You just don't have that. So that piece is missing without our volunteers. Not to say our staff doesn't do it, but they see the same residents every single day. So after a while, it isn't quite the same. But having said that, we have been going forward trying to make that work with our administrative staff, with our care staff, making sure that everyone is safe. The other things that have gone into place that we never did before, we had to limit visiting hours. We've never, ever limited visiting hours. I mean, what we do is care for people who are at end of life. Where does their family want to be? They want to be at their bedside. They want to be able to come in and stay, spend the night, do whatever they need to do in order to be close to their loved one. That just wasn't possible because, as you know, with pandemic and talking about infection control, the person who you're talking to may be fine, but you don't know who they have been in contact with in the community. So it's that whole spread thing. So we had to limit our visiting hours, and we did that. If someone, one of our residents was imminent, we would call the family. They could come, and only 2 could come, but they could come and stay at the bedside and sit vigil. So, we have always done that, even when we had other visiting limited. But what that did was, because of necessity, we weren't able to have extended family longtime friends, people who this person had known, be able to come and see them. And at the end of life, it's been my experience in these last 22 years that I've been at Francis House, you are not creating a larger circle when you're at that point. You are drawing your circle in. And the people that you want to see are those who you have known the longest and who are the closest to you. Casual friends stop by and it's nice, but at the end of the day, the people you want around you are those people that you've known for your whole life. And not being able to have that happen, to me, has been very difficult. It makes me sad. Because it's what we do. It's what gives that additional presence to someone, helps to bring peace. You know, just talking about a common experience and a laugh for 5 minutes. It's wonderful. And not being able to do that has been hard. I'm sorry.
The Franciscan background of it, and that is connection. That
Absolutely.
is compassionate connection and creating community and being there for someone. And that is a whole key behind Francis House, you know, that makes it so special. So, you know, whereas during this time, I know you are creating home and you are creating the family and you're creating that feeling. But yeah, to not be able to do one of the core values of connection, that's got to be so difficult. I understand that.
Yeah, and it is, and I think for people who've never been to Francis House, and we did it at one point a number of weeks ago, begin to bring residents in, bring in new residents, because we needed to do that, we wanted to do that, and we were at a place where we could safely do that. I mean, the people that we're talking with in the hospital and people at home who've been giving home care could give us enough assurance that this person we were bringing into the house had either been quarantined or really was at very low risk for exposure to COVID. So to bring them in would not put the house at risk, would not put other residents at risk. So we have begun admitting again and bringing people in. But so new people who come are not aware, I don't think, they're not mentally aware of what they're missing because they've never had it from us. Our care staff, I have to say, they have gone over and above to bridge that gap. They really have to take the place of a family member who's not there, with FaceTime, with telephone calls, with just spending time with our residents and really creating that compassionate presence for all of our residents. They have just celebrated birthdays. They have just gone really a mile and a mile and a mile ahead to maintain that connection, that family, that feeling, because that's what we know. I don't know that someone brand new would know they were missing it because they never had it from us, but we know. And so I think the part I would say is that's been one of the hardest things for our staff, for all of us, is not being able to give someone that huge hug, not being able to just let them cry on your shoulder. It's just been so difficult because of what we do. But having said that, despite wearing masks, of course I didn't mention that, but everybody has to wear a mask and gloves. And in fact, we have our caregivers, when they are in the room providing care for the safety of the resident, they wear face shields. It's not so, our residents are fine. We're not worried about them, but we want to protect them from anything we might have had happen to us. So they wear face shields. But even with that I know we're going to talk about empathy in a minute, but I think that empathy that we have, that we're all alike. We are all children of God. We are all divine creation. We each have needs for community, for comfort, for care, for love. And our staff has just really stepped up to try to make that happen through the face shield, through the mask, through the gloves. they have really, really tried to make that happen for our residents. And I think they've succeeded. And for our family members who come in to visit. So despite all the stuff that has to happen, we try to do that, but not make that the focus. We try to work around that to make the care of this resident the focus. What they need is what we want to be able to give. What that family member needs at that moment is what we want to be able to give in any way that we can. So temperature taking and all the stuff that you have to do, because now everybody gets their temperature taken before they come in, staff and visitors alike. Despite all the stuff, I think we are still creating, as you said, that home and that family. It's not the perfect family that we want, but it will get there.
Right.
It will get there.
Right.
And we're working on a plan now to bring our volunteers back. We'd like to get them back into the house, and they're anxious to come back. We're anxious to have them back. So we'll stepwise, do that. Be careful, be slow, like everybody says, take it easy, a little bit at a time, and see how it goes. Modify if you need to. So that's where we are. I think all of us are used to this now in our own lives at home. So when we bring it into Francis House, it's not that much different. We're all of us, whether you're here or not, called to a new normal, and we're trying to incorporate that new normal into our home in a way that still allows us to fulfill our mission the way we want to fulfill it. So that's our post-pandemic story.
Yeah. But,
Yeah.
and the Sisters of St. Francis, they live compassionate empathy. So they have that so ingrained and so incorporated into how they live their day-to-day lives.
Right.
And I know that both you and I have been well-versed and well-trained.
That is so true.
As to what is expected and how that works. And
Right.
so that we're able to create practices
Right.
and techniques to and teach volunteers and staff and people how to incorporate that and also monitor it
Exactly.
every single minute to make sure
Exactly.
that that's always being maintained. So I see all of that in Francis House, and I think a lot of people don't realize that connection, that we are role modeling something that exists in that Franciscan connection and home, and looking at it from every single perspective of creating the security of being in a place where you're comfortable, being in a place where you don't have to worry, having the comforts of home, but then adding everything on top of that, which includes joy and celebration.
Exactly.
So, and I think that's important for people to know too, which you have touched on, that when you walk into Francis House, it's not, it's not death and dying. That's not what you're walking into. You are walking into a vibrant family of comfort. And also, people can walk in the door and feel the comfort that they can be and react and, be whoever they feel, and it's okay.
That's right. I think, despite all the stuff that we have to do, let me just back up a minute, because we spent the last number of years, because we've been so fortunate to have Sisters of St. Francis on staff here. We have spent the last number of years really focusing on Franciscan values, relationships, communication, empathy, compassionate presence, through all of our staff retreats, through our monthly staff meetings where we always have a Franciscan moment, sharing stories, sharing the way that we all are connected. We have done circles of dialogue based on Joyce Rupp's Boundless Compassion, and it really helps staff connect in that way. And I think all of those steps have really helped us to get through these last few weeks. And I think they will help us all get through the further on we go, because we know there's a bigger force at work here. that we are part of. And when we draw on that for our own strength, and we draw on that for our empathy with one another, and understanding that our situation is unique and yet it is the same, I think it really helps for us to be able to weather this. And we will get through it, and we will continue our mission. We will continue to give the care. It may be a little different for a while as far as what we have to do, but at the end of the day, we're going to be caring for people who have put their trust in us at a time when they are the most vulnerable. And they have said, and their families have said, although I can't see my mom except for these few hours, I know she'll be okay because I trust that you're going to take care of her. And that is a responsibility that none of us takes lightly. We incorporate that into everything that we do. And I think our staff, I keep saying how much they've done, and I can't praise them enough, because this work is draining. It's physically draining. It's emotionally draining, because you put so much into it. And yet they have just been so wonderful, because they understand what it means to these residents. They understand what it means to these families to say, I have you, I'll take care of you, you don't have to worry. You know, I will be here when you cannot be, and I'll do what you would want me to do. And I think that that's a trust that we've had placed in us, that it's without value. I mean, it's invaluable. Let's just say it has more value than you could imagine. So
yeah, you know, it's something that you bring up about incorporating the connection and relationships and everything like that. I think that really is a source of strength. And it really makes it sometimes, I think, easier for us to weather this storm, because we're so involved in the mission of connection and relationship. So, you know, we say a lot about becoming stronger on the other side of this, or coming out of this stronger. And so do you feel a sense of the things that are happening now creating strength? And are there any gifts that you are taking from this that you think will move into the future of Francis House?
I think anytime you are tested, it does create strength, however you're tested. And we have been surely tested. Many homes like ours across the country closed during this pandemic. They are smaller. For various reasons, because we're not a medical place, we're a home. And because of that, we have to be so careful about what we do and pay so much attention to the care that we're giving, to make sure that it is far and above the care that a person might receive anyplace else with a very high standard. So making the decision to stay open was a big decision, and we had to really think about all the ramifications. But I think it was the strength of the mission and everyone's agreement that we must maintain. However we do this, for the community's sake, we must maintain. We cannot have been 29 years doing this work to let a virus close the door. We had to maintain. So I think there was strength going into this pandemic because of who we are and how we've been mentored by the sisters. I think that has been huge for us. I think there will be strength coming out the other side because we have gotten very close to one another. We've all been very dependent as staff on one another. It's all of us in here together. And you know, the news always says we're all in this together. Yes, we are, but we are in together in this microcosm that is Francis House, and we really are dependent. If I don't do what I'm supposed to do, there's a big hole, because there's no one else to fill in for me. You know, and I don't mean me, I mean me as the general, anyone here at the house, because we're all necessary. We are all necessary. We are all essential. We are essential, though, to one another. And I think that's the part that will help us to grow. And we'll look back and we'll see things that we did that we say, you know what, going forward, I would maybe approach this differently. Going forward, I would change this or that. So I think there will be good things that we will look back on and say, you know what, we learned from this. And you should learn. You should learn from any exposure to anything that you do. So we will learn from this. We will be stronger because of it, because we can say, you know what, through all this time, no matter what was going on, Francis House stayed the course. We were able to do what we do. We continued to do it with all the help and love and prayers and support of all the community that supports us. And we were able to go forward. So it isn't just the people here, it's all of the people who have been longtime supporters, who pray for us, all of our volunteers who send us notes and cards and call. How are you? Can I bring something by the house? What do you need? You know, finding paper towels dropped off at your front door. That is such an indication of how much love people have for this ministry and how much they want to see it survive and continue and to grow. So I think, to me, how people have reacted, how our friends and supporters and volunteers and staff have reacted, that to me is just such a humbling knowledge to know that, you know, this is so much bigger than all of us, and each person has their piece, and each person is willing to give something of themselves in order to make that piece fit into the puzzle that is Francis House. Yeah. And without each of those pieces, it just wouldn't be whole. Yeah. There would just be things that it would not be the same. So yeah, I think that we will learn. I don't know exactly, I can't tell you an example right now, except that I have a huge, huge appreciation for the people who are here on this staff. To see them personally put themselves in a position which may be inconvenient for their families, working extra hours, taking extra shifts, you know, doing things that put other things kind of on hold. Never a worry, never a concern, just we need to do this. This is what we have to do, so we're going to do it and get it done. And I don't know, just the love you feel from the community has reinforced for me how lucky I am and how blessed I am to be part of this ministry.
Yeah. Well, I am amazed, you know, even knowing Francis House, just hearing everything that goes into it. And I think this is providing a special service for people who are aware of Francis House, but now see everything that goes into it. And this is why it feels this way. And this is why I feel this way when I go through the door, because of all the detail and everything regarding the mission and the vision that's incorporated into every detail of what happens there. So I really appreciate you sharing everything with us.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Is there anything that you just like to end with that you want to make sure you put in there? You know, I'll obviously put any links that you want into the copy and the text that will go with the recording, but, you know, anything you'd like to add?
Well, I just, you know, I don't know who will be watching this, but I would just want to say, whoever, thank you for all that you're doing in whatever way you're making your ministry and your mission move forward, or you're helping with your family, or you're doing homeschooling, or whatever you're doing. I think all of us are called to a standard we probably never really considered during this time. And I appreciate you, and I thank you, and I know that as a whole, we'll all be better for all that everybody has done. I would just say that if you want to keep up with what is happening within Francis House, we do have our Francis House link, our website, which is the www.francishouseny.org. And we have a COVID update, we have a volunteer section, we have information about activities that are still going to be planned for Francis House. So if anyone has an interest, they may certainly go to that website. And while we are not actively bringing volunteers back this month, we're going to begin doing that in a relatively short period of time. So that if there is anyone who wants to experience Francis House firsthand as a volunteer, please look at our website and it'll give you all the information. And we would love to even bring you in, just show you around and give you a sense of what we're about and see if you think it's a fit for you. Because our volunteers are the heart of our home. I mean, we have all missed them dearly in this past 2 months and hope to have them back again. So I would just put a plug in for volunteers, and thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you, Nancy. And enjoy your day and take care of yourself. Stay healthy. And we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Kristen. Everybody stay safe. Kristen, be well. And thank you for allowing Francis House to be part of this presentation. We appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.